Welcome to the Bible Made Clear. So last week we ended off in Revelation 17 talking about the judgment of religious Babylon. And so we'll be moving this week into Revelation 18 and the judgment of commercial Babylon. So there are distinctions between the two. So let's actually make a comparison. So Guzik tells us, he says, there are definite similarities between Babylon as described in 17 and 18. Both are under the rule of Antichrist and have ruling queens. Both are filled with blasphemy. Both hate the saints and shed their blood. Both are associates with kings in fornication, and both are under judgment and destroyed. However, there are also some significant differences. Now, before we go too far, let's take a quick look at Revelation 18. If we read quickly, it says, after these things I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become the dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hated bird. In other words, this is going to be the worst type of environment. Sounds like a horror movie. Verse 3, for all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues. For her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Render to her just as she rendered to you, and repay her double according to her works. In the cup which she has mixed double for her. In the measure that she glorified herself and lived luxuriously, in the same measure give her torment and sorrow. For she says in her heart, I sit as queen, and am no widow, and will not see sorrow. Therefore her plagues shall come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judges her. So we'll stop off here at this verse, and then we'll jump back into the outline here that we're going through. So here is the comparison. Now, obviously, in chapter 17 on the left and then 18 on the right, Revelation 17 calls it Mystery Babylon because the focus really is the religious aspects. And then Great Babylon, Babylon the Great, it's called in chapter 18. Comparatively, the symbol in 17 is a harlot woman, where the symbol in 18 is a great city. So we have those two as contrasts, in a sense. Number 3, it's identified with Rome. Religious Babylon is because it doesn't need to be a city. And then it's identified with a port city in chapter 18. Now, it's interesting. There's been this theological debate between commentators as to whether Babylon is the literal city or not. Now, we've talked about this a little bit, but it is kind of like, it's like talking about Hollywood. When we talk about Hollywood, Hollywood is a town, it's a city, but it's also a system. And the discussion about Babylon is very similar. Now, Babylon has to be located someplace. There has to be an actual location. And there has to be a location because when it's destroyed, we see that the merchants are standing afar off from it. So they don't want to get too close to it. So that's speaking of locality in some sense. At the same time, it's a worldwide system that people have committed fornication with. Now, obviously, much of that is spiritual fornication. It's the trading off of God for the luxury of the world and the filth and everything that comes with Babylon, the idolatry and just the whole commercialization of buying and selling everything, including people. But but it also has to have a location. So number 4, religious Babylon is seen as a woman, a whore, and a mother, right? A harlot, where commercial Babylon is a habitation, a great city, and a marketplace, right? So you have the commercial and religious aspects. Number 5, religious Babylon is guilty of religious abominations. And then the commercial Babylon is guilty of greed and self-indulgence. But you can see how these will all play together. And finally, number 6, it says religious Babylon is destroyed by a political power that previously supported her, which is obviously the first beast's and his kingdom. And the second one, the commercial Babylon, is destroyed by a sudden act of God. So it's, this is typical of when you have these governmental authoritarians that rise up. They will use some form of religion as the vehicle to help get them there, and once they're established, they turn against it because they're not interested in it anymore. So the comparison continues. Robert Thomas says, the question is, how different from the Babylon of chapter 17 is the Babylon of 18? Now, we saw some of the differences previously, right, just now, but he says, undoubtedly, the city is the same in both instances. Both have the name Babylon the Great. Both are guilty of fornication and of causing the kings of the earth and earth dwellers to imbibe of the wine of the anger of the city's fornication. The destiny of both is to be burned with fire and to become an utter desolation. In both chapters, Babylon is the great city. And again, all these references are here. I don't need to read them. You can read them on the screen. And wears the apparel and adornment of a harlot. Both are responsible for the martyrdom of the faithful. Yet a different aspect of the city is in view in chapter 18. The major guilt in 17 stems from the city's abominations, which we saw in the previous chart. But in chapter 18, it is her sensuality associated with luxury, and the word really means wantonness. It's a giving over. The economic prosperity and luxury of the latter Babylon, in other words, the commercial, is a marked difference from anything said about the earlier Babylon. So, again, you get a number of references here that you can see, and they will help you if you want to do a deep dive and make the actual comparison. And I've highlighted in red every place where Thomas says both. So they're there for you. Now, in chapter 18, 1-8, which we read, again, Thomas says prophetic or proleptic, in other words, anticipating of the future, right? Aorists of I fall express the certainty of the future fall and a part of the solemn dirge over the condemned city. He, John, now pictures the fall of Babylon only through the laments of heavenly and earthly onlookers. He does not see the act of destruction itself because it is still impending at the end of the chapter. Now, this is interesting. He says, as though, as it is through the central body of the chapter. So John doesn't actually see it destroyed. He's telling you what the people that see it destroyed are saying, and so which tells us that it is still yet future, in a sense, from what John was even looking at, or what he was trying to communicate in what the angel was showing him. And this is interesting because so much of the book of Revelation makes it clear that it is in the future. It's not something that has happened over history. It's not kind of the historical view of the book of Revelation, where, or the kind of symbolic view and all that, where, all the different things that happen, we try to take them allegorically, and then, well, let's see, this plague could be this, or this plague could be that. And it's not laying the seals, trumpets, and bowls, because there's 7 of each, over each other. And then, the first seal is combined with the first trumpet and the first bowl. And then that's what happens there. And then you have the second seal. Because as you watch and read, in a sense, through the book of Revelation, what's happening is the seals are unsealed one by one. And it's not until the 7th seal that the 7 trumpets actually come out of that 7th seal. So there is a chronology there, and they call it telescoping. It's like a telescope as it kind of gets pulled out. Well, that's what's happening. You get one thing after another, but then you have the 7th seal that ends up giving birth, in a sense, to the 7 trumpets, and then the 7th trumpet to the 7 bowls. And you have all the chronological language in there that, then this happened, and then that happened, and next, and next, and then. And so, those small words can't be ignored. I've mentioned that before. So as we move to verses 9 to 20, let's actually take a quick look. So we left off at verse 8. Now, 9 through 20 says, the kings of the earth who committed fornication and lived luxurious with her will weep and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance for fear of her torment, saying, alas, alas, the great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. Now, that's really the smallest increment. I mean, the Bible doesn't really use minutes. It can say immediately. The old King James term for that is straightway. They still use that in England in some senses, and it means immediately. But when something is happening and there's no real delay to it, it says something, it is within the hour. That's typically how it's represented. Paul and Barnabas, when they went to Jerusalem in Acts 15, you had Pharisees that said that they believed, but they also felt that you need to keep the law of Moses and Gentiles be circumcised. It says, Paul said that him and Barnabas contended, he said, but not even for an hour. In other words, like we didn't waste time with this. This was obviously something that was not worth the debate. We squashed it pretty quickly, and then had the Jerusalem Council through Acts 15, but another subject. So here, moving on at for in an hour your judgment has come, verse 11, and the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, for no one buys her merchandise anymore. Market's gone. Merchandise of gold and silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen and purple, silk, scarlet, every kind of citron wood, every kind of object of ivory, every kind of object, most precious wood, bronze, iron, and marble, and cinnamon and incense, fragrant oil, and frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, and wheat, cattle, sheep, horses, chariots, bodies and souls of men. So they trafficked in everything, all kinds of commodities, the expensive stuff, and down to people. I don't think people realize, but, there is slave trade is very active in the world. We call it human trafficking today, but it's the same thing. Now, you may mean, the slave trade really has been throughout history. I mean, we see even back in Egypt, they eventually made the Jews slaves in Egypt. But, as we've come into more modern times, even within the past, 1,400 years, the main slave trade, at least over the past 1,000 years, really has been the Muslim slave trade. The Muslims they were the ones that enslaved the Africans, and the African people were overtaken by these band of Muslims that used to sell them into slavery. Now, eventually, it made its way over to the United States, which created the slavery here in our beginning, but that would never have happened if there was no Islam. Islam still raid villages. They still steal people for slavery, for sex trade. They go into villages. I mean, you can look this stuff. This is available on the internet. Nobody really wants to look at it much because, quite frankly, it's awful. But you can go to Voice of the Martyrs, and they give you a list of some of the worst places where Christians are persecuted and killed around the world. And many times these group of Muslims, they will go into a village, they will kill the men and the children, and take the women, either in slave trade for, just to sell them, or they'll take them because they're Christians. They'll take them as one of their wives, and basically they're locked into this miserable world of a prison of hell, basically on earth, especially based on the fact that they're Christians and they know really what's happening with them. It's terrible. But this is what God is going to destroy. This is the awfulness that most of us don't see. This is, there's a whole subculture in the United States. Much of it has really been developed, quite frankly, over the last 4 years with the Biden administration, with the letting in of so many of the, with the open borders and the cartels and everything else. I mean, human trafficking was through the roof. Just an awful, sickening thing that was going on. At the same time, around the world, it's worse. I mean, there's not like there's anybody really preventing it. So it's just, I mean, I don't really have the words, and I don't want to get into a lot of it because it's an awful thing. It's abominable. It's an abomination to God. People are made in God's image, and they should never be sold for anything, especially children. It's just awful. And in its full development, Babylon is basically heralded for the selling of people, for the bodies and souls of men, as it says at the end of verse 13. And because it's destroyed, you have these merchants that are weeping. Oh, you've ruined our business. I mean, this is big money. sex trade is big money. And, even coming into the U.S., so many people don't realize that many of these kids that were lost when they came into the U.S., they were sent to addresses where basically they would become slaves to work off the money that their family didn't have to get them into the U.S. And these kids will be slaves for the rest of their life and until they die. And this is happening in different neighborhoods throughout the country, and people don't even know. It's just so I don't know what your political affiliation is, but there is nothing. There is I don't know one good thing that happened over the last 4 years. I can't really think of anything positive, quite frankly, that the left has put forward. There was nothing beneficial. There was nothing meaningful. There was nothing to develop or help the lives of anybody other than the politicians themselves that were in power. Beyond that, everybody else, it had an appearance as though it was doing something positive, but it wasn't. And that system that you saw in a microcosm over the last 4 years, that is going to be in full-blown production without anything to stop it in the tribulation period. And that's what this is talking about. Because if nothing stopped what was happening over the last 4 years, then this is what you would be seeing. You would just see a further development of what happened, and then eventually, with all the stops off, that's what you're going to get in the tribulation period. Not a good time. You'll have just basically a worldwide misery. You'll have the ultra wealthy people, the elites, the ones in charge. They'll be living the high life off the lives of the less fortunate and the people that had no advantage. The same way it is today in the world. It's really no different. But you know what? Communism, socialism, which is really communism, Marxism, that's not the answer, because that creates this. They claim that capitalism creates it. I beg to differ, because as you're watching right now, at least in our own country, Donald Trump, again, I don't know what your feelings are about him, but he is trying to put the country back on course for what its intended purpose is. He is trying to develop the economy, because if we have no economy, we can't even put gas into the ships and the planes that are supposed to protect us from other invaders. You have to have an economy to have a military and everything else. It all works together. So putting the economy back together is being done through capitalism, because capitalism motivates people to do a good job. That's the only reason why we have money coming back into our country. Now, again, I'm not getting in. I don't want you to think that I'm, branching off into politics, but politics is what we're dealing with here in Revelation chapter 18. The whole thing is politics. It's the politics of the Antichrist. It's the politics of the one world religion in 17, the one world economic system in 18, and Jesus Christ coming back to destroy it because of what it was doing in destroying people made in God's image. So there's, again, the people that love this, the earth dwellers. You see through the book of Revelation, the people that, the earth dwellers, they that dwell on the earth, they hate God. He's interrupting what they want done. And, they're drunk with power. This is the issue that we're seeing here, right? So verse 18 says, the fruit that your soul longed for has gone from you. I mean, this was their life, and all the things which are rich and splendid have gone from you, and you shall find them no more at all. The merchants of these things who became rich by her, this is where their wealth came from, off of other people, right? will stand at a distance for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour such great riches came to nothing. Every shipmaster, all who travel by ship, sailors, and as many as trade on the sea, stood, at a distance. Now again, this is because it's worldwide. The trading is worldwide, which is where the ships come in. Verse 18, and they cried out when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What is like this great city? They threw dust on their heads and cried out, weeping and wailing and saying, Alas, alas, that great city in which all who had ships on the sea became rich by her wealth, for in 1 hour she is made desolate. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her. So that's through verse 20. And so let's take a quick look here. So when the kings who were involved with the city see the destruction, they will be grieved and will cry, Woe, woe, O great city, O Babylon, city of power. Right? Merchants, too, will bemoan the city's downfall, since they will no longer be able to carry on commerce with the city. The description in Revelation 18:12 and 13 indicate the great luxury and wealth of the city. This obviously refers to an economic and political situation rather than a religious one. Mourning of the merchants is similar to that of the kings. Woe, woe, O great city. So this is from the Bible Knowledge Commentary, both of these comments here. And then it says, sea captains, sailors, and others in navigational occupations will lament in similar fashion. Woe, woe, O great city. Revelation 18:19. All three groups, kings, merchants, and sailors, speak of her destruction as sudden in 1 hour. As the world mourns the destruction of Babylon, the saints are told to rejoice because God has judged her for the way she treated you. Interesting. So, verse 20, which is the last one where they're told to rejoice, this reveals how out of tune with heaven earth dwellers can be. This is from the King James Version Bible commentary by Ed Hinson, and there's a number of other authors with it. It says, when on their pilgrimage on earth the saints suffered grievously at the hands of the apostate system, but now in their hour of vindication they exult in God's justice. And then verses 21 through 23 here at the end, it says, Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, like a great millstone, and threw it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence the great city Babylon shall be thrown down and shall not be found any more. The sound of harpists, musicians, flutists, and trumpeters shall not be heard in you any more. No craftsman of any craft shall be found in you any more. And the sound of a millstone shall not be heard in you any more. The light of a lamp shall not shine in you any more. And the voice of bridegroom and bride shall not be heard in you any more. For your merchants were the great men of the earth. For by your sorcery all nations were deceived. And in her was found the blood of prophets and saints and of all who were slain on the earth. Very miserable. So here it says, her ruin is final, complete, and irreversible. The symbolism in verse 18:21 is related to Jeremiah 51, which bears out the impossibility of recovery from this judgment, which is the destruction of Babylon in Jeremiah 51. Along with the passing of the city, there will be an end of music, crafts, housekeeping, sound of a millstone, um, illumination, and the joys of marriage. The cause of it all is her deception of all the nations with her religious sorcery, an activity promoted by demons and Satan, included in the entire system of ungodliness from the beginning of man's sojourn on earth. So, a pretty good summation. Now, verse 24. And in her was found the blood of the prophets and saints and all those slain upon the earth. To emphasize this third point of the guilt, the angel switches from the second person to the third, dropping his direct address to the city and telling the last great cause of her overthrow as a general act. So this is Thomas, and he also says Jerusalem has a long history in shedding righteous blood, and he gives you the references. Babylon, too, is a city of bloodshed in the Old Testament, as it is in Revelation, with the references. Others in Revelation who bear the responsibility for martyrdom are the earth dwellers, we see them again, the beast from the abyss, and the beast from the earth. Blood violently shed cries out for vengeance until it is rewarded by the punishment of the murderers. The destruction of Babylon answers to that punishment. So nobody's getting by with anything. And look, I don't know if you know Jesus, but if you don't let Jesus pay for your sins, you will pay for them. Either he's going to be judged for them, which he was, and you will believe in him and let that happen and turn your life over to him, or you'll have to be judged in them yourself. Either you or he is going to receive judgment for them. There's no need for you to, where he already has. So, as a last piece here, we're not going to be getting into Revelation 19 right now, but this is up on the top right. It says Charting the Bible Chronologically, a visual guide to God's unfolding plan, again by Ed Hinson and Thomas Ice. This is a great resource. This is a picture out of it. And what this does is this gives you kind of the tribulation timeline with the, the 7 years, the first and the second half, and with the midpoint being the activities in the middle, right? The two witnesses killed, and then they're resurrected and ascend to heaven. The abomination of desolation occurs in the temple. Satan's cast down to the earth with the fallen angels, right? So this is happening. Antichrist killed, brought back to life, 3 global angelic announcements, and Israel flees to Petra in the wilderness. So, you're really looking at Revelation chapter 11, 12, 13, and 14, kind of at the midpoint, where there's information explained about what's going on at that midpoint. But then you can see, on each side of the middle, right? Like, for example, to the left, under where it says midpoint of the tribulation, that square, it says Babylon rebuilt and is capital for the Antichrist. On the right, the city of Babylon is destroyed by God, right? So the first half, the Jewish temple is rebuilt. Under that in the pink, sacrificial offerings resume. Jewish temple taken over by the Antichrist, who sets up his image, right? So you can see both these comparisons. Now, down where it is yellow, it says seal judgments, trumpet judgments, and then bowl judgments. That is how I understand best the way the judgments will lay out. We did talk about this earlier during the seal judgments, where some people actually, or actually even prior to that, but some people, commentators think that, the seventh seal and then the trumpets and bowl judgments are in the second half. I don't really see it laying out like that. The book just doesn't seem to lay out a chronology in that way. However, there are good people on both sides. I tend to agree with it the way it's basically laid out here. So, but anyways, again, hopefully, this is helping you kind of get a little bit of a grip on the book of Revelation. And until next time, may God richly bless you as you continue to study his word.